The Eternal Cities within Elden Ring are home to many secrets that seem to have been heavily overlooked. The biggest of which, in my opinion, has to be the Fingerslayer Blade. Something that might be niggling at your brain is, well, the Fingerslayer Blades have been talked about to death. What the fuck do you mean, Gecko? But I really do think there's been a really heavily overlooked detail that has some really heavy implications for the war between Nokron and the Golden Order, the heinous crime they committed, the death of demigods and, well, Marica the Eternal herself. So please, sit back, relax, grab some juicy, succulent, tender prawns if you want, and enjoy as we delve deeper into the mystery of the Fingerslayer Blades within Elden Ring. Within Elden Ring, the death of demigods is heavily linked with significant events happening. The best example being the death of Godwyn the Golden, leading to the Shattering, and all the tragedies that followed. And I think from everything we know about the Eternal Cities, I think it's fair to say that something similar might have occurred within them. The Fingerslayer Blade states, the hidden treasure of the Eternal City of Nokron, a blade said to have been born of a corpse. This blood-drenched fetish is proof of the high treason committed by the Eternal City, and symbolises its downfall. Cannot be wielded by those without a faith, but is said to be able to harm the Greater Will and its vassals. There are multiple interesting facts here. The first that pops out is it's literally said to have been born of a corpse. Now this is further reinforced by the fact that if we look at other swords which have been born of a corpse, for example the Sword of Milos and the Sacred Relic, they both share the same sort of spine patterning that is located on the Fingerslayer Blade. Something that's really interesting though is the sizings. Now if we look at the Sacred Relic and the Sword of Milos, they're fully grown adults, the Sacred Relic being Radhn, and the Sword of Milos having been made from an undersized giant. The sword, by the way, is really similar in size to the Sacred Relic, so that sort of tells us the kind of size this undersized giant actually was. Something truly creepy comes of all of this. The Fingerslayer Blade is tiny, it's a dagger. Compared to this tiny dagger, normal sized humanoid people create great swords as seen with the Sword of Milos and the Sacred Relic. So at first glance it might seem like the Fingerslayer Blade makes no sense. But it actually makes a lot more sense in my opinion than you might originally think. I think, as morbid and gross as it is, I think the Fingerslayer Blade is actually a child. This makes a lot more sense, especially considering its size. We're never actually told what the heinous crime or the high treason that was committed by the Eternal Cities was. I believe it was actually the infanticide of a god. More specifically, I actually think it's a deformed demigod. Now if you look at the spine, compared to the other spines, it's twisted, it's curved. Now I'm no medical professional, but it looks like scoliosis to me, that sort of curving of the spine. It's also worth mentioning this is not seen on any other of these sort of swords made of corpses. It's an isolated incident to the Fingerslayer Blade, which in my opinion further reinforces the fact that maybe whatever corpse this was, whether it actually be a child or not, was deformed. Before we go any further, I do just want to say, I'm not just pulling this out my ass, it does say in this description that this blood-drenched fetish is proof of the high treason committed by the Eternal City. And I truly believe that the treason that was committed was the killing of Marica's own child. Another reason why I believe this to be the case is the fact that it's said that this blade is able to harm the Greater Will and its vassals. Now that to me seems like, well, if this corpse is going to be from anyone, it would be someone related to the Golden Order and Grace. That to me seems like the most logical answer to why this blade is able to kill and harm the Greater Will and its vassals. And given its size, it seems like that whoever this person was related to the Golden Order was a child or someone in their adolescence. Another reasoning why I believe that this is a child demigod that is the Fingerslayer Blade has to do with another patterning located on it. Now if you look, you can see this sort of double helix patterning which can also be seen on the Sacred Relic sword. Now you might be thinking, well, this may be something that is isolated to, well, corpse swords. But if we go to the Sword of Milos, it hasn't got this patterning. Considering this and their multiple similarities, I genuinely don't think it's any coincidence that they're so similar in appearance. I genuinely think that the Fingerslayer Blade is a child deformed demigod that was killed by the Eternal Cities and its assailants. I think it's really easy, especially considering the lore of Elden Ring, to just immediately paint Marica as this evil witch bitch and that she is just this horrible person. But I also think it's really important to look into the motives of her and why she might have turned into the person she turned into. I think the same goes for anything, especially even in our world. I'm not a parent, so I really can't comment on this, but from what I know, losing a child has to be the hardest thing that a parent could deal with. And you've got to imagine, yes, she is a god, Marica is a god, but she still has a conscience from what we know. So would it be so far-fetched to think that the death of this child led her down the path she did? It's really hard to know because everything happened so long ago that actual accounts, person-to-person accounts, don't really exist. We just hear rumours and legends, and that really doesn't help Marica's case. Something I find really interesting though, is if this is a dead demigod, how come we don't hear anything about it like we do about Godwyn when he died? I think it's a really interesting detail, and I think the reason is because Marica may have hid this deformed child away from the public eye. If the public knew that her, a god, created a deformed child, she would definitely, I think, feel shame about it. Kind of like how she locked away Mohg and Morgoth. It's really hard to know whether that was exactly the scenario. This is what really gets me about Elden Ring's lore, is everything happened so long ago. It's really hard to know the exact details, the minute details that we need to know. And I think that's an intentional design choice. Miyazaki and George R.R. Martin are bloody geniuses, and this is just another great example of that. Something I found really interesting when, for the video, I was going to the Fingerslayer Blade and picking it up. In the same room where the Fingerslayer Blade is found, which by the way is located underneath the chair where a massive giant is sitting on, which is crazy in of itself, inside that very same room is the Ghost Flame. Now I've talked about this in previous videos, but I actually believe that the Ghost Flame is the absence of grace. In case you didn't know, in our world, cold is actually the absence of heat. I believe in the same light, the Ghost Flame is the absence of grace. Now the reason this has so many implications, for the starters, it's inside the same room as the Fingerslayer Blade. I think maybe there was some sort of coup against the Golden Order. It seems very likely from everything we've seen that the Nox are in fact related to the Numen. Now the Numen are from the same land, the same world that Marica hails from. Now the fact that they had enough time to settle down, create the Eternal Cities and create this whole culture implies that Marica wasn't after them the whole time. They had time to do this. So at one point in time they weren't enemies. And yet eventually, at some point, they turned enemies. That makes no sense unless you consider that this high treason was the killing of this child, but also the betrayal of grace, where they found the Ghost Flame, just like how the Hawk Knights did in Death. I do admit the whole idea of it being a coup is a lot less concrete than the whole Fingerslayer Blade stuff we talked about previously, but it does seem like a possibility and a theory that I thought about and I wanted to put to you, just because I really like the idea. I think there's some plausibility to it, but there's not 100% concrete evidence to it. Another interesting detail exists in the fact it's called high treason. Now, high treason, to me, sounds like a crime that's been judged. They've gone to a jury and they've just gone, hey, Nox bastard, you're charged with high treason. That seems to be the sort of wording that is used, but that would imply that they've gone to some sort of justice system within the lands between, which I didn't know there was a justice system, but, you know, who's to say there isn't? But the important part of this is the fact that people seem to have known about it if this was some sort of justice system, and it wasn't Marica just going, hey, this is what happened, I don't give a shit what you think. So if that is the case, why do we not hear about it? And I think it goes back to that whole adage of Marica doesn't want to be embarrassed. Oopsie daisy, I birthed a child that sadly had a deformity. It honestly baffles me that years later people are still simping over Ranni and her 4 arms and the freaky shit she could do with them. So I just want to bring to your attention that if everything that I've just said is true, Ranni sided with the same people that killed and butchered and created hell a weapon out of her deformed baby brother that was innocent. Now, if that isn't some evil shit, some cold-hearted shit, I don't know what is. I'm running out of excuses for Ranni at this point. Then again though, is it so far-fetched that she would side with them? After all, she did play a hand and was the main conspirator in the killing of her own other brother. She just loves killing family members, it seems. Or at the very least being impartial to their deaths. Sadly everyone, that is the end of the video. If you did enjoy, please consider leaving a like and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. I've been thinking about this sort of topic for a really long time, and I really hope you did enjoy me finally talking about it. I know I did a video a few days ago, and I know I normally upload on a Saturday, but this is coming out on a Sunday, so I am sorry for that. I just wanted to get a video out earlier in the week, and I was just a bit burnt out, and I was like, you know what, I'll just do it on a Sunday instead of a Saturday. So, apologies for that. Anyway, I'm not going to ramble anymore because this seems to be a recurring topic, me just rambling at the end of the video. So, I really hope you do have a great rest of your day, and may you find your worth in the waking world. Goodbye everyone.